I have to get used to looking at the camera.
I know. I was like, it takes a moment. Hold on one second. Hey, you guys, we are live. Oh my God, we haven't been live in like a hot minute. I hope everybody can hear me. Hold on. There we go. I don't know why I didn't do that. All right, you guys, can you guys hear me? We good? We good? Hello, everybody. How are we doing, everybody? We're live. And I was like, oh, there was someone else I reached out to and they just messaged me back. All right, you guys. So say hello. I know we haven't been here for a little while, so I'm really excited to have the show. I don't know about you guys, but I have been like crazy deep in getting ready for the TV show to go live here in October. So as you guys come in, say hey, let us know that you're here. Let me know that you see us. I'm double checking everything on my side, make sure that it's good. I don't know how many of you out there use StreamYard, but for some reason it just likes to be a bit of a butt. All right, here we go. So there we go. We are live. We are good. So let us know how you're doing. Please join in, you guys. Say hey, interact, ask questions. Today we're going to be talking about something that has been definitely going around, especially with COVID, and that is mental health. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the stigma of mental health. And I really wanted to come to this from a little bit more of a personal perspective. I know you guys are used to seeing the panels with a few people on, but tonight it's me and Michelle. I'm really excited. So this is more like a one-to-one. So I think we're going to get to do a little bit more of our stories in this, which is always great. But I really wanted to take a second to discuss mental health and discuss why it's so important to begin having these conversations. For those of you guys who know me or maybe don't know me, you know that I'm like the queen of just having conversations that are considered uncomfortable. And, I've really believed that mental health is definitely one of those topics, especially in this day and age where the rate of, youth suicide is like doubling and tripling day by day. And even as adults, especially during this pandemic, we are just having a larger volume of people who are going through mental health struggles. So if you are someone who has been or is going through a mental health struggle, please drop it in the comments. I'd love to know a little bit more about your experience, what it is that you've done to overcome some of your struggles, or, what is it that you do on a daily basis just to get through every day? Because we're going to touch a little bit on anxiety as well and what that looks like, and even just some of our own personal ways to move through the anxiety. So again, as you guys come in, say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and share this in some groups. Oh my gosh. And then I'm going to drop in and introduce myself and my guest. And so, hey, okay. All right. So you guys, I'm going to drop into my intro. I'm going to introduce my guest and then we're going to get started. Hold on. What's up? Oh, Derek says hello, people. Hello, Derek. It's lovely to see you. I know we haven't been here in a hot minute. So you guys, hello and welcome to the TUF Woman table. This is the TUF Woman Roundtable, and it is me and Michelle tonight. So this is the table where I invite some super badass tough women like Michelle here to take a seat, join in on the conversation, share her story, and just really, again, start challenging the status quo, you guys. At TUF Woman, I believe that all women have the power within themselves to live an authentic life, free from fear, confident in who they are, and empowered to go out and create a life that sets their soul on fire. I share this belief by championing tough women who have walked through the fire, felt the fear, faced adversity, and kept pushing through it all. Women who now live the life they want as the woman they were created to be, and women who own their stories so other women can embrace and own theirs as well. Because as I always say, you guys, as I make it a point to put out here, when we step up courageously and vulnerably into our story, into a conversation, we use our voices to move it forward, we give somebody else the same permission as well. So, oh, look, hello, everybody. Hello, Sean. Hello.
Hey.
Gosh, I'm trying to make sure that I'm like not in the middle of my logo. So you guys, I'm going to introduce my guest here. Her name is Michelle Montero, and she is just like, I want to say you are a jack of all trades, but she is an amazing VA and just a wonderful woman. So I'm going to let her introduce herself a little bit more, and then I will give myself the proper introduction this time. So Michelle, if you will, tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do in the world.
So my name is Michelle Montero, and I help I help women-owned businesses basically tackle the behind-the-scenes tasks of building a business online. It's extremely stressful for a lot of women to do this, especially if they're doing it by themselves and if they're, moms. So a lot of my tasks include just the digital marketing strategy aspects and a lot of the aspects them. So they get to just live stress-free life, and be productive all the way around.
Mm. And I think that's something we'll definitely touch on, because one of the things I think that comes up that we don't recognize that is part of mental health is that overwhelm that we seem to push ourselves in, especially as women and women in business, right? We talk about that overwhelm. So that's something, ladies out there, that we will be touching on tonight. So my name is Ashley, you guys. Hello. I am the host of this show. I'm the host of the TUF Woman Table, TUF Woman Coaching. So, and the TV show aspect too. I'm really excited about that. So I help female entrepreneurs, specifically female coaches, work to understand their, I don't want to say their darker side, so that they can move into becoming a sovereign being and really running their life as they see fit. So living life on their terms. But on the flip side, I do this show. And so I facilitate and champion the tough conversations, the ones that are considered too taboo, too controversial, and too just generally make people uncomfortable. As I've been telling people pretty recently, I just like to punch people in the face really nicely, punch them in the face with some love, right? So you guys, this is my like heart and soul here, being able to provide these conversations, to have these women on like Michelle here, and just really start creating some dialogue and potentially some solutions. Because one thing I want to say before we get in here, it is so important to have these conversations, to share our stories, to create dialogue, because when we show up in this space, even if it's just one person that sees us, we are impacting someone's life in a way that it may not have been impacted. So for anybody who out there, if you are considering a route like this, or you're looking to become visible, especially, just remember that by showing up in this space, you're helping somebody else show up in this space as well. So you guys, we're going to start off tonight. I'm going to have Michelle share some of her story about what it is to, work through her daily life with, going through mental health struggles, what those look like for her. I'm going to share mine as well. And then we're really going to dive into what it looks like, especially being a woman in business, as both me and Michelle are, what it looks like to just be, to work through mental health struggles, and just understand the stigma of mental health and what that looks like as well. So Michelle, if you will tell everybody, what is your story?
So ever since just being younger, I always had social anxiety. I've always been extremely timid and kept to myself. So it took a lot of growth and just putting myself out there to even get to this point where I'm even able to speak right now. And even just on a day-to-day basis, I do get a lot of anxiety if I really think about it. In the sense of just right now, I was really excited for it all day, and I'm trying really hard to just hang in there, because it is kind of nerve-wracking sometimes, to put yourself out there.
I agree. And that's something I actually wrote a note about, because, for anybody out there who's wondering, there are, a lot of the times I'll come in here, I have a good outline, but it's one thing to be immersed in the conversation, to really understand the pieces that come out. And that was one of the things I made a note about, is the anxiety that we deal with about going live and being visible. And something that I talked to a trauma therapist about is we in the space, I think, have the ability to be more polarizing, and we forget that there are people who are going through trauma, and to be polarizing is to negate the trauma or what mental health struggle that people are dealing with. And it's not as easy as, oh, just get up and do it, right? Have you ever gone through that, Michelle, where oh, just get out there?
Oh yeah, definitely. I don't know, probably back in high school, I would just be told to just get out there and make friends. But it's well, you're not in my shoes right now. You don't know how panic mode I get when I have to go do that in person and stuff. I'm very much more comfortable being quite slightly visible in my own sheltered place, we're doing right now. I chose to come here, sort of deal. But a lot of times people see it as nothing is really wrong with you. You're just kind of weird if you're like that. You know what I mean? A lot of times people act or behave as if mental health isn't really a thing. It doesn't really exist because you can't see it. And it's very much a thing. It affects people in different ways, and it even affects our bodies.
Yeah, and Terry says, yes, I remember that. You'll be fine. Just do it. And you are panicking and thinking, I can't. And she says, I've so been there, girl. I was like, I had to read that for a second. Yeah, and that's something that I think, especially a lot of women, something that I've come across too is, we think, oh, well, it's like imposter syndrome and inability to show up, and really it's just having those reactions and having to work through them, and not always, and like you said, people just not understanding. And that's what I'm going to do, my little bit of my story real quick, and then I'm going to drop into a little bit about stigmas and how that looks and how that actually portrays out in the real world, because this was something that was big for me. And like you just commented on, people will often see a physical impairment and go, oh my gosh, okay, they obviously are struggling, and we're going to offer empathy and compassion to that person. But what so often happens with mental health is because people don't see it, they're just like, oh well, it's not a problem, they're obviously something is not going there. And she says mental health is very much a thing. A lot of people don't understand that. That's true, and that's what we're here to talk about again. And coming from a more personal perspective, I think it's one thing to be up here and shout a bunch of statistics at people, which obviously I don't think anybody has to not, hasn't seen that how bad mental health has been right now with this COVID-19 pandemic. But before we get into that, let me tell you a little bit about my background. So I guess you could say that I've struggled with mental health for most of my life, as far as like just dealing with depression and anxiety on a pretty daily basis. And I definitely see it in the female line, which is why I think it's so important for women to understand, again, the shadow aspects of ourselves, because we deal with so many things as women, and we get so many things passed down to us. So I always grew up seeing the women in my family dealing with mental health struggles, depression. My mom dealt with bipolar when she was younger, and just dealing with the stigma around that, and then seeing how it played out in my own life. So as I got older, those mental health struggles manifested into an eating disorder. And then as I got older, it manifested into codependency issues and things like that. And I remember when I came into business, when you first start walking that line, I definitely had a lot of shit that I had to sort out, because like you, Michelle, I really had a fear around being visible in front of people. And you're talking about like when you're coming onto these platforms, people are like, use their platform. It's when you're going, especially if you're going against the crowd. I want to talk about this for a second. The anxiety that does come up, I don't care how much fortitude you have as a person, the anxiety that comes up when you're going to say something that's like polarizing or against the status quo, and people are just going to be like, here, let me just like slam you in the comments. You know what I mean? That was something that I really had to begin working through and begin understanding a little bit more about, and begin working through, so that I could start showing up. And it's a lot like you say, Michelle, it's just really choosing to show up every day and keep working through that. So, that was really my biggest struggle. And a lot of my mental health has always definitely been understanding my anxiety better, and understanding like, when do I need to back off and start taking care of myself. So first and foremost, I really want to talk about what does it look like to go through a day in your life, Michelle. I mean, and you can share as much as you want, but what does it look like to really walk through this world, dealing with social anxiety? Because I know that there are people out there, especially in the online space, who are like, you know what, I think the one thing I see when we talk about getting visible and stuff and just being in the online space is like women especially feeling like failures, because they have this social anxiety, and it's hard for them to show up, and now they feel like they're failing in their business. So what does it look like on that journey for you of just working to work through that, so you can continue showing up and getting out there and doing things like this and being visible? Because I'm sure there are women out there who would greatly benefit from that.
So on days that I really feel anxious and uncomfortable, it usually like just I wake up feeling super scared and not inside my own skin. So I just feel really anxious all over, and I can barely even like get out of bed sometimes. So a lot of what I do in order to just pull myself out of it, I've been painting recently. So I use art as an outlet to just like let myself go and flow. Some meditation from time to time. I've gotten into some yoga, and I like to really just stretch my body out. So like I'll just like start stretching a lot, and it just allows me to feel more free, because a lot of times that anxiety bottles up in your chest and you just feel like you're going to explode or something.
Mm,
So that's what works for me, just like meditation, yoga, stretching, painting.
mm. I love it, and that's important. I like that you talked about if we don't, if we don't move the energy, that's something I want to say to people out there. Exercise is tremendously important too, and just getting up and moving your body, because oftentimes we don't realize the ramification. Like you said, you mentioned this too in the beginning, of what this does as a physical effect on us. So the things that we don't move through our body, or they end up stagnating within us somewhere, whether that's like an ethereal energetic body, any of that, and it can actually end up manifesting in the physical for us. So for me, I'll say this: when I start neglecting self-care in regards to my mental health, those things, that anxiety starts manifesting as a headache, like an energetic headache. And I start feeling that, and it's like literally shuts me down, so I cannot do anything all day long. So the other part I want to talk about also in regards to this is staying mentally healthy during a crisis. So one thing that I really admire you for, Michelle, that I've watched you, is you choosing to be vulnerable and show what it looks like to really understand your mental health better, especially like during the days when it's harder during this crisis. So aside from being a woman in business, what has it looked like as far as like working through your mental health, going through this crisis and this pandemic with everybody else?
Well, I guess a lot of it has just been uncomfortable in the sense that not a lot of people can go to like stores together. So for one, when we go grocery shopping, one of us, me and my fiance, stay outside. And if I end up staying outside with the dog, sometimes people end up wanting to make conversation about our German Shepherd. But I'm so socially awkward sometimes and uncomfortable and quiet, and like I said, extremely timid. So I just kind of freeze up and I don't really say much. And I think the other day, one of his friends or something had asked me if I was okay. I was just like being super alert, just waiting for my fiance to come out of the store. And he asked me if I was like sad or something. And I was just, just being there, being me, trying to like not be super visible while people were just passing by. So that's kind of like what I'm still kind of working through on a day-to-day basis outside of like business.
Mm. And that's something that I like that you touched on that. So a lot of the times we think, the one thing that I've seen as far as stigma goes, we oftentimes think, like, from what I've seen, that if people can't vocalize what they're struggling with, then they must not be struggling as bad. Like, this is something I actually came across. Well, if they can't talk about it, it must not be that bad, right? Like, if they can't
Mhm.
talk about it, it must not be that bad. If it's not there and apparent, then they must not be struggling as bad. And I want to talk a moment on something that really brought mental health into place for me. And that was my daughter's own struggle with mental health. And, we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to what it looks like to be a good advocate for someone who's going through mental health. What does that mean to be an advocate and someone who offers a support system for somebody who's going through mental health? But my daughter is a teen, and back here in January, she was having some serious struggles with her own mental health. And it really opened my eyes, because up until this point, my daughter seemed happy, and she was doing all the normal things, and she seemed okay. And obviously there were some points where I kind of had that intuitive hit, like, maybe you should check on her a little bit more. But again, being the mom and her being the daughter, I kind of just went with whatever she told me at the time. Lo and behold, move forward into January, and it's a completely different story. And for respect out of my daughter, I'm not going to really divulge it in the story that much more. But we often think that because a person isn't vocal about what they're going through, that maybe they're not struggling with what they're struggling with. And we look at this in the terms of suicide is the way I've seen this too, is we think, well, they were just so happy. Like, have you ever come across that, Michelle? Like, oh, you're just so happy. Like, I don't see how you can be struggling with anything.
Yeah, I feel like that comes a lot in men specifically, just because men are usually supposed to carry this very like masculine, persona. So a lot of times, if they're complaining about mental health or experiencing some mental health discomforts, they don't talk about it because they don't want to be called like feminine, or they just don't even want to fit into that stereotype at all, just because they're a man.
Amen to that. Well, and that's something I I really hope starts getting switched. I would love to see more men start opening up about what it is they struggle with, because I firmly believe that if we normalized men being able to tap into those more feminine perspectives, we would probably see a lot less domestic violence. At least that's my hope with that. So I want to switch a little bit about what it looks like to, again, just work through daily struggles around mental health and business. And I want to ask you a question on what it is that you started doing to help you move towards being a more visible person in the space. Because one of the things, obviously, that is so important in this is, in the online world, especially right now with COVID, is like, we have to be visible. I think the thing I've heard them say is like, if you're invisible, you're not in business, right?
Right.
So tell us a little bit about, again, just a little bit iteration about what it looks like to really work through that journey so that you can so that you were able to start showing up for your business.
So for me, just having a support system and understanding when enough is enough for me. So for personally, I'm kind of extremely intuitively energetic. So if I have too much connection with too many people, I end up so drained and I just can't function for the next couple of days. I need to recharge. So I usually just have that support system of my daily yoga, making sure that I'm eating and drinking a lot of water, obviously, because a lot of times when we don't give ourselves those basic needs, we're going to end up having those moments of anxiety or depression just because we're depriving our body. Um, Also, just my fiance understands my body language, and so does the dog. So if I'm uncomfortable in social situations, they understand my body language, and we're able to just like get away from, a crowd or whatever. My parents were extremely understanding of my, boundaries as well growing up. So just people understanding your boundaries, establishing boundaries in the first place is really important, and communicating to people what's going on so that they're aware and respect your boundaries. That's
Mm.
what helped me the most, honestly, the boundaries.
Yeah, I think that's something that we all need to have. One of the most powerful things I saw that actually helped somebody with social anxiety was having those boundaries. So having the boundaries about who she could be, or who she allowed into her space. And I agree with you. You'd be amazed how much less anxiety you have when you have really strong boundaries in place. Because I know for me, it's like if I don't have to interact with certain people, I'm like, okay, way less anxiety because I don't have to deal with these people anymore.
Yeah.
And yes, mental health is more silenced in men. That's true, Betsy. Again, yeah, back to that. And I want to touch base on that in a moment. So, men, if we have any men on there, if you would like to comment on what are some of the struggles you've dealt with in regards to your mental health journey, I would love to hear it. I'd love to talk about it for a moment. But yeah, back to mental health and business. So I think that's really important is having the support system, because you also need that support system for when, if you're like me, one of the things that I've dealt with, and I think that this is the lesser talked about thing in regards to mental health, but it's the one thing that's coming out now, especially for women who are in business. And Michelle, I'd like to hear your thoughts on after, but I want to say that the hustle mentality, and I feel like it really stems out of anxiety. Like I really feel like the hustle mentality really stems from anxiety, and this is just my own perspective on it. But that need to just constantly like be going, like that nervous energy is what they call it, and this was something that I dealt with. So this Anxiety that if I wasn't visible and I didn't get out there, then I was going to destroy my business. I wasn't going to be able to, and what it would do, it literally would paralyze me. I wouldn't say it would paralyze me into activity, but what would happen is I would do, and then I would burn myself out, overwhelm, and I would crash. And like you said, Michelle, I wouldn't be good for weeks after that. I wouldn't be good for weeks. And is that something that you feel like you see a lot of women falling into, that just like having that nervous anxiety that they have to be showing up, they have to be constantly doing, or they're going to fail in their business?
Well, yeah, now more than ever, especially moms, because, with the whole pandemic and stuff, we're freaking out and wanting to make sure that we are making ends meet or what have you, so that the house can get paid and the kids are okay. And that can be extremely like nerve-wracking, fear inducing, and, panic mode sort of deal. I wouldn't even imagine what certain people are going through right now, not being able to make ends meet.
I agree. Yeah, that's something that in and of itself is its own terror. I've definitely been there. It's not something fun that you want to go to. And I guess I'll share a story before we go any further, because about a year or so ago, I decided to quit my job. Jump off the cliff, they said, and you'll grow wings on the way down, is what they said. And so I jumped off the cliff, and I did not grow any wings, you guys. I didn't grow any wings. I crashed really hard at the bottom, not going to lie. And for a really long time, I struggled, not a really long time, for a few months. I definitely ran the gamut of being incredibly chaotic within my life, chaotic within my business. And I think one of the biggest things that's so important to understand about mental health, whether you're being an advocate or someone who's working through it, is the importance of self-care. And I really want to touch on this just a little bit when we get to the end and we offer like solutions and things that we feel are productive for people moving forward. But when I jumped off the cliff, as they call it, just jump off the cliff, you'll find your way. You'll find your way on your way down, and if you don't, then that means you have a lack mentality. Like that's the programming I always used to get. Not only, you guys, did this shove me into such a survival mode, like fight or flight, but it caused serious ramifications within how I showed up in my business. So I think right now we're being so challenged to just show up in these spaces, and we have to find these solutions. And what that's doing is causing a lot of disruption, you guys. And if you are out there going through that, I'd love to hear what what it is that you are doing to make sure that you're working through that and getting that self-care. And so I want to take a second to pivot that a little bit and start talking about the self-care aspect of what does it look like to start taking care of ourselves through mental health. So Michelle, you talked a little bit about what your day-to-day look like and how those things, and I would like what are the key pieces? So you talked about meditation, like what has really been those key pieces to helping you overcome your biggest mental health struggles?
So basically, mostly just having a support system first. My family supports me. I have my fiance who supports me. They're all on board. They understand. We communicate. So having that communication and making them aware of your triggers or whatever symptoms that you're experiencing, so you can get the help if you need any. Also, journaling or meditation, anything that's going to be some sort of an outlet to help you release what you're feeling besides just talking about it. Sometimes there's things we just don't want to talk about, and we just are able to more release it in a creative way. I think that's the most two important ones for me.
Awesome. I always appreciate, Michelle, for women like yourself, you especially, coming on here talking about this, because, to be able to say, hey, this hasn't been easy, is a huge step towards really being able to embody the things that you want to embody. And the other thing, you guys, is, and this is why this is so important, when we talk about the stigma of mental health, I did some back research on this. One of the things that they say, the reason that stigmas are so perpetuated as far as mental health is because we just don't have the conversation. So often what happens is these stigmas lead into as far as jobs and stuff goes, so discrimination within the employment practices and stuff. And one of the key things that they talked about was being able to have conversations, you guys. Have conversations around mental health. I know that when I was growing up, I went through a series of depression. And I remember there were two ways that sorry, y'all. I was provided solutions to this, and one was to pray it out. Like, you just need Jesus. You just need Jesus. And if you pray about it, Jesus will remove the mental health. And the other part was, I remember when I went to my mom and I said, okay, I would like to go into a depression study, which is something I did when I was in middle school. And she said, well, they're going to stick you on medicine. And then people are going to look at you funny if they find out that you're on medicine for depression. I don't know about you, Michelle, but did you ever come up against anything like that as a child? Like, was that like, what were the common stigmas you saw around people with mental health when you were growing up?
Definitely that people who took medication for mental health were crazy or lunatics, or that if you went to see a therapist, that you're some sort of psychopath or something like that. Just all negative cognitives of mental health when it came to mental health in general. It's sad.
It really is. Like, I remember one of the things that I had to learn as far as stigma wise goes was actually a stigma that I perpetuated, and it was in regards to addiction. And so this was something, you guys, for anybody out there who is struggling with addiction, I cannot personally say that I've dealt with that on a real scale, but I had to recognize that a lot of people who are struggling with addiction are also struggling with an undercurrent of a mental health problem. So they're having a mental health struggle. And, when I was in pharmacy for over 5 years, and then I was also married to a gentleman who has an addiction to opiates. And I even had to learn how to redo my wording. So he's not an addict per se, it's just he has an addiction to a substance. So what happened was, when I was in pharmacy and stuff, you guys, the stigma that I came across is that all addicts are bad, right? And so what happened was, we often saw people who were struggling with severe mental health problems, and there was so often the stigma that surrounded them as well. Not that they were bad, but there was something inherently wrong with them. Like, why can't they just handle this? Or, we see it oftentimes in the news, especially in regards to addiction. It's like, why can't they just get better? Right? That's my least favorite stigma. It's like, why can't they just get help? Why can't they get better? That was one that I struggled with for a really long time, is like, why can't my ex-husband choose his kids over drugs? Like, why is it? Right. And I really had to learn, and I'm speaking for anybody out there who's wondering, it's like, well, how do we start breaking the stigma around mental health? How do we start changing the conversation? And it's really just changing the way we view mental health. I think we think that mental health is a societal issue, and while it is, it's also a personal one as well. It's something that I really had to start understanding, like my own views on people who have addictions to substances, but also my own views towards people who have mental health struggles that I myself have not been through. I think one of the most common stigmas I've seen, again, is that one is like, if I can't see it, then it must not be that bad. And so that's something that I would love to ask you about, Michelle, because you deal with anxiety and stuff. What does a true anxiety attack look like for you? Because something else that I've had to really understand is what it looks like to have a really have a real anxiety attack, and why that can be just as destructive as having something like a physical disability.
It can be as simple as me sitting here and talking and feeling okay, but like my hands are just ice cold and I'm shaking and my heart is racing and I may be sweating or something. And the other person may not even realize that you're having all of these feelings and feeling like you're having a heart attack, which it actually does feel like you're having a heart attack. And I think I did some research and I confirmed that it does feel like a heart attack. So it's just one of the most, I don't know, like suffocating feelings in the world. You just can't breathe.
And so, what does it take to work through something like that? Because, again, back to breaking the stigmas, I think one of the most important things that can help begin doing that is to have the conversations around what do these look like and what does it actually take to start reframing ourselves. Because something that I've come across in other topics that we've discussed is this whole belief that a person like has to do it by themselves, or it makes other people so uncomfortable that we can't even talk about it, right? Like we don't know what to say. So for somebody who again has gone through these panic attacks and these anxiety attacks, what does it take for you to actually pull yourself through something like that?
Well, it depends on the intensity of it. Sometimes I just need to take a moment and regroup myself, take some breaths and ground myself, remind myself of where I am, and just really just let myself know that everything is okay, because most of the time everything is okay. We're just panic mode for some odd reason, that our mind just triggers. So just remind yourself and ground yourself, meditate real quick. It can be 2 minutes, it can be 5 minutes, but give yourself that time.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. And it's really important to just, this is something I had a conversation around today, just showing yourself some grace through the process of whatever that looks like. Really, I want to see, I would love to see with mental health, especially normalize getting the self care that you need. Something that's been really huge for me that you do as well is just meditation, is being able to quiet my mind enough to hear what's going on. Again, back to what you said as well, is having the support system. It's having people remind you, like, this is a very temporary emotion, but what's the undercurrent of it, right? So it's like, what's understanding, like what's going on with us. And then again, back to just releasing any shame we have around it. I think one of the biggest stigmas that I also come across in regards to mental health is people being made to feel shameful for going through what they're going through. I had a woman come onto the show one time and she talked about how she dealt with postpartum depression for a really long time, and then severe depression around deaths she had within the family. And when she went on to medication, she was really made to feel shameful in the beginning. How dare you be on medication? Like, what do you need medication for? And she said she really had to come to this space where she was like, you know what? The medication is what helps me make it through my day. And I think if we as people can come to this space of starting to release the shame that we perpetuate onto people who struggle with mental health disorders, we'll be able to really start facilitating a much more beneficial advocacy for, being a good advocate and being just a good person and a good friend for the mental health journey. So I want to talk a little bit, start switching it over to more of the solutions aspect of everything. So my question to you, and I'd like your thoughts on this, is how do people start becoming a good support system or a good advocate for somebody who is struggling with mental health? How do we begin showing up in that space, even if we don't understand what it is that they're necessarily going through? How do we begin creating that support system for them?
We just have to start validating each other. Like, for instance, I can't you I didn't insult you if you feel insulted. It's the same thing with feeling depressed. If I'm feeling depressed, you can't tell me that I'm not depressed because you don't feel what I'm feeling. So a lot of times we don't understand that we're not in the other person's shoes, and we think what they're going through is so small. We need to validate because they're just as important as you are. We are one, you know. So when we have that understanding and we love each other to that point where we allow each other to feel what we feel and accept it and just try to find the solutions, like whether it be, talking to you without feeling judgment, or getting a therapist without feeling judgment, and, you know, whatever support or help that you need to get in place, you just need to be able to validate people for it.
Hmm. And I want to say for mentors out there, because this was something And this is something I've been doing a little bit in the background. So, and this is probably going to ruffle a little feathers. So, Michelle, you don't have to, you can comment or not on this one. So, one of the things that was really hot topic for me is, do we as coaches start helping people treat trauma? As most of you guys know, we work in a very unregulated industry, the coaching industry, and there are a lot of people out there claiming to treat trauma. And so I'm not pinpointing this to anybody, but I think one of the most important things that we can do as an advocate is understand our scope of support. I say this because I feel incredibly responsible as someone who used to talk about treating trauma. We have to understand our ability to actually, what can we, first and foremost, we as coaches are not here to treat, diagnose, or any of that, but what kind of support system can we offer as mentors? I think that's really important because we are a key part of somebody's support system in some place. So one of the things that I recognize is understanding our scope of practice as coaches, facilitators, and what we can do. And this is huge. And because something that was passed along to me from a therapist who works with trauma is like, we can oftentimes open the Pandora's box. And we don't know what we are causing to go off in another human being, right? Michelle, have you ever just been unwillingly triggered by someone because they just didn't recognize how they were coming across to you? Like they just really had no sensitivity to the way that they were maybe saying things or doing things.
Yeah, definitely. Some people aren't really aware of the things they're doing or saying. Sometimes they're in their own little bubble. So you may end up getting hurt or triggered in some way, shape, or form, and they may not understand it at all.
Mm. And this is important. And I think this is a good stage because you guys, we really live in a world where right now, especially, we're all online and we have the ability to impact people just by the things that we say. And we are so polarized every single day by just an inundation of crap all day long. I don't know about you, Michelle, I don't know about anybody on here, but I can't watch the news. I can't do it.
No.
I get the most horrendous case of just like you said, that just feeling like a tightness in my chest.
Mhm.
And it's sometimes it is the same thing with social media. If anybody can resonate with that, please drop like hell yeah or something in the comments. But sometimes it's really hard for me to come on to Facebook. It's hard to come on and come on social media and just see people screaming at each other all day long. It's literally like I want to call the trauma trigger. It's like my childhood all over again, like just people screaming at each other. And again, it goes back to that trauma thing. We as coaches, we as people who provide support have to really start understanding the space that we take up, have to understand the verbiage that we use. And I'm not saying don't speak your truth, but you can speak your truth and not trigger people in the same process. And that was something I had to understand. You could speak your truth and not trigger people in the process. Like, I firmly believe that if I'm triggering people like that in a way that causes them to have a panic attack or anxiety attack, then I'm possibly not showing up in the space that I want to show up about. So I want to talk a little bit about solutions about going live and being visible as well, because this is something I know that we as women in business struggle with. So going live, being visible. Michelle, I want to know about what are some things that have helped you become more visible, and then I'm going to provide some as well. So what has helped you to allow you to become more visible in your business and really start getting out there? Because aside from having this conversation, I think you have a phenomenal presence online. You're just very much there in the space that you need to be in. And if I didn't know you any better, I would only see, I wouldn't see what it is you're talking to me about looking in. So what is it that you have done to really help you be able to just become more visible and be able to go online and have these conversations and be here doing this with me?
Well, first, I invested in a business coach who specifically is to help you get more visible, like comfortable with video. So that's what she was helping me with. I started off by having just conversations on Zoom one-on-one. And then I slowly moved up to having like live, I don't know, like live trainings that I would host with her, or, like things like this that you and I are doing. So just slowly building up my resistance or like my comfort zone until the point that I'll just end up doing lives all the time. I'm not there yet though. So I'm still very much working on it. And it's always going to be like an ever going, process because everybody's different. So that's just me personally. I'm still going at it.
Hey, and I think that's where the grace thing comes in, right? Like we have to give ourselves grace. One thing I want to talk about because, I feel like this is part of a lot of people's mental health struggles, myself included, is the need to is feeling like we have to show up in a space that maybe we don't want to show up in, right? So feeling like we have to do these things, and then when we don't do them, we potentially attach shame. And you guys, I'm speaking from a really personal perspective, saying I'm not saying it's y'all, I'm saying this is what I've done.
Me too.
Yeah, right. Oh my God, if I didn't do this, then I attach shame. If I didn't meet this goal, then I attach shame. And I would just literally like berate myself to the point where I almost made myself cry a few times. Like I literally would fling myself into a horrendous panic attack. And that's why I touched base on a little bit of the understanding trauma as a coach and understanding like how do we show up in the world? Because the same way we show up for the people that we coach or we work with is the same way we should be showing up for ourselves, right? And what happens is we don't extend that to us. So for anybody who's in the online space who might be struggling with anxiety or any other kind of mental health struggle, I want you to first and foremost recognize that one of the key things, and I know this is probably easier said than done. Like I said, I don't say this is like an absolute. It's just being able to find grace for yourself, whatever way that looks like for you on the journey. I think finding grace is key. And again, I can only speak from personal perspective. I like being abundantly clear about that. So for anybody who was out there, it's like, well, it's just easier said than done, Ashley. Like, I get that. I firmly understand that. So I think what's good though is being able to find that grace and just recognizing that you only need to do what you feel you need to do during that day. And if you feel like you need help, whether that's a therapist or a coach or whatever, then I hope to see that getting that help being a more normalized thing, learning to reach out. And that's the other part. So being a good advocate also, I believe, is being able to take a second and check in on people as well. I don't know about anybody else out there, but I feel like the most important people in the world to me have been the ones that have advocated for checking in on me when I go like MIA for like a few weeks. So do you have those, Michelle?
I do. If I go missing for like 3 days, my mom calls me or my dad. So it's like nice to know that people care. Like, oh, I haven't heard her for a while. What's going on? Like
Yeah.
it's just one of those things that you appreciate.
Well, and again, like back to my daughter, one of the biggest things that I've learned from her going through what she has gone through is not constantly, I won't say I'm not hovering, but checking in like every single day. It's so simple for anybody out there. It's so simple to ask somebody, how are you doing today? It's the most simple thing. How are you doing today? And especially in the online world, when we're talking about getting out there, being visible, it's like asking ourselves the same, how am I doing today? How are you doing today? Right. So I deviate a little bit, but if you are dealing with and working through the anxiety of being visible and doing these things, first and foremost, give yourself some grace in the process. Don't feel that there's a space that you have to hold up. I, for one, am horrible about setting insanely high standards for myself. And again, when I don't meet them, then my world comes crashing down. I'm getting better about it.
We want the best for ourselves.
Huh?
We just want the best for ourselves. We hold high standards.
Exactly. I just want I gotta remember that though. So giving yourself some grace, some leeway, and self-care is really important. Something Michelle touched on. doing what you need for your body, for yourself, for your mindset. Meditation, again, is huge. It's key. Yoga is beautiful. I'm big on working out. And so doing these things, and even like breath work, is really key. And understanding that this can look, you only have to show up in the space you want to show up in. So this can look any way for you. So I want to touch base a little bit more on, before we go, how do you feel, Michelle? What are your thoughts on reframing stigmas towards mental health? What do you feel the world is going to need to start releasing these stigmas so that we can begin having and facilitating more conversations around mental health? Because as we've both seen, and as I'm sure you've been privy to, mental health rates are skyrocketing. I think the rate of suicide in teens is like they're saying is like doubling and tripling. You know what I mean? Like, that was something I asked my daughter. I was like, my daughter's 15. I was like, why are so many teenagers in your generation, why are they so depressed? You know what I mean? And as someone who's in a different generation, it's having that consideration and asking myself, like, well, that's a good question. Why are so many young adults so depressed? And what can I do to help them, start moving forward from that? So how do you think we start releasing those stigmas and start making it so that we can facilitate conversations to create solutions?
First, we need to talk less and listen more to the person who's talking about their mental health. I don't feel like the person listening is in their shoes or anything like I said, to tell them any different about what they feel. So talk less and listen more. Second is just no judgment. If you're in a vulnerable position, you're not wanting to receive judgment. You came out of your shell to seek help. So if you receive judgment when you're seeking help, it just makes you want to like shut the door down even more. Like, it's just like you put your guard down and all of a sudden you're getting judged when you're trying to get help. So you put your guard back up, and that's not going to help. So just those two things. I don't think I can think of anything else.
No, that's perfect. And I agree with you 100%. And I want to come at it from the perspective also of looking at it as if if you don't understand what someone is going through, who is going through. So if you're someone like myself who has really dealt with the not so severe side of mental health, meaning I've only dealt with run-ins with depression, and I'm not saying that to negate those and saying those are less severe, because I believe they are, but in regards to the scope, the realm of, the more severe mental health struggles like schizophrenia and stuff like that, I have only ever had experience with the two, with, anxiety, which I've never fully had a panic attack. So like I said, there's my limited perspective on that, but I want to come at anybody who's out there in the audience who has a more limited perspective like myself. How are you showing up in the world to facilitate a non-judgmental or judgment-free zone where somebody can just have a conversation with you and be like, what, this is what I'm dealing with, and I just want to be heard. Because again, back to like those polarizing conversations, I know that I've said some things before that have probably really been upsetting to people. And it's having to have those conversations with myself around, am I playing the devil's advocate to causing someone who is coming from a trauma space to be even more traumatized and to feel judged and to feel shameful? So I think if for those of us who are in that space, we have a bit of a responsibility. And not because I'm telling you should, but because, it goes back to the golden rule: treat others as you would want to be treated. If I was struggling with something like this, I agree with you, Michelle. I would love it for people to hold space for me, to just be like, what, I see you no matter what way you think you look. I see you exactly as you are, I see you exactly as you are, Michelle, whether, what, and if you're struggling with something, my hope is that I'm able to always provide spaces where even though you feel like, maybe you feel like you want to not be here, but I love that you're here anyways. And my hope is that I always facilitate that space And so I think we as people who maybe have perpetuated the stigmas, looked at people differently because we don't see it. And I'll be the first to admit that I've been one of those people. I don't see it, so I don't understand it. And I can only see it from that perspective that I know, which is someone who's not walked through that experience. And it's really alienated me and dehumanized who I am. So I want to take a second to say that one of the things I think is important to dismantling the stigmas around mental health is if you are someone who's not necessarily gone through that, or maybe you have and you've worked through it, like Michelle said, be that space for somebody else. Really ask yourself, like, what is it that I would need, or what is it that I want to provide to someone who maybe I don't understand? And I think that that's just culture, like the culture now. Look at what we have going on with racism and stuff. And it's the same concept. Like, we don't need to be sitting here and talking about who should be doing what. We just need to sit down and listen to people who are actually going through it and dealing with it. That's the space we need to hold in. So that's my thoughts on being an advocate. And if you have the opportunity to facilitate a conversation, if you're out there and you have the facility to start having conversations about this, then I encourage you to get out there and host these conversations. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to be a space where people feel free to share their stories, use their voice, and just be heard, and do it in a way that other people will hear you as well. Because I think the greatest challenge to breaking the stigma is people continuing to stay quiet about it. People feeling like they can't talk about what they have going on. And we as a society not providing a space where people feel comfortable to just be heard and have their voices heard. So that's my thoughts on starting to break that stigma and just being a good advocate for somebody who has mental health struggles. And as also for anybody who's out there as a parent, if you have a child who is going through mental health, Michelle, you said this perfectly, just being able to support your child in a way that's non-judgmental. Be like, what do you need? I can't tell you how many times I ask my daughter that. What do you need? Are you okay? What do you need? And trusting that they know, I'm going to say this, and some people are trusting that they ultimately know what's best for them. I can't tell you how many times I tell people I do that with my daughter because she just turned 15, and they're like, but she's like 14, 15. She doesn't know what she needs. I'm like, she lives in her head. Okay, I don't live there. She does. I mean, I think she would know if she needs to be on medication. Like, yes, if there are extenuating circumstances, obviously I don't live in people's shoes, but really start trusting that, like you said that, Michelle, like if you say you're going through depression, I trust that you know what that looks like, and that's what you're really going through. So giving someone that trust and extending that olive branch and being like, I believe what you're saying, and just being that space for somebody. All right. So that went by fast, man. Like, you guys, thank you guys for being here. This is so cool because we are on the eve of the television show airing. I'm so excited, you guys. But thank you, Michelle, for being here. I'd love for you to let everybody know where to connect with you. Again, just tell them a little bit about what it is that you offer service-wise and best way to get a hold of you. And then we will keep moving forward.
Sure. So I offer digital marketing services for mindset and business coaches, and you can find me on michellemontero.us.
You guys, I highly recommend you reach out to her. Michelle's got a wonderful amount of services. She is a wonderful person to work with. She is an even more awesome person to have come be on your show if you have one. So please reach out. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so happy, for you to come on here. I know you guys talking about Michelle being the champ. I had somebody else that was scheduled to be on this panel. They had obligation. They're actually a minister, and somebody, a few of the members in their congregation had some losses in the family. So for anybody out there who prays, send good vibe, please send them to her, send her way. She is ministering to some families who have had losses within their family. So I understand that. And, but Michelle came on here as a trooper with me to have this conversation. I think these are really important conversations to have. Like I said, when we start having conversations, we can start breaking the stigma. we can bring more people into the conversation, and that starts a snowball effect where we really just start opening the space to create that non-judgment zone for people to feel like they can be heard. So you guys, thank you guys for being here. Please keep an eye out as we go along the day. I'm going to have one more show this week on Thursday. And then we will be solely on the platform, completely Apple TV, Amazon TV, and Roku. So you guys keep an eye out for that. If you catch us on the replay, hashtag replay, make sure you keep following us. Look for my website to be released really soon, www.tufwoman.com. And just keep following along with the show. I'm going to make it so that you can contact and connect with all my amazing guests that come on here and just continue facilitating conversations that create movement and solutions in the world. Because I think right now in society, that's what we need. We all know what the struggles are. I'm not going to say problems, the struggles are. So let's start focusing on how to bring solutions into the world. Okay. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Michelle, for doing this. Always.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I will see you guys on Thursday at 7:30.